Hello everybody. Today we're talking about times in history that humanity was wrong on an iceberg. The first entry we have is geocentrism. Geocentrism is an old astronomical theory that proposed that the Earth was literally the center of the universe, because why wouldn't it be? I mean, humanity's here, guys. Of course Earth is the center of the universe. This, of course, is incorrect. It has always been incorrect, but ancient people back in the day really liked the thought of like, well, what if everything rotates around us and not the other way around? Now, this was posited and very much so propped up by the Catholic Church, and when Galileo proved that the geocentric model was not accurate, the Church came after that boy hard. It's a huge point of contention and suffering in Mr. Galileo's life, so shout out Jupiter's moons for causing an Italian man a lot of trouble. While we're discussing theories about the Earth and how they have been wrong in the past, let's go ahead and talk about the myth of the flat Earth. Nowadays, flat earthers are considered laughingstock. Why would the Earth be flat? Why would all of the top scientific institutions in the world be in on the joke of convincing everybody that it's actually a ball if it's not? How would physics work if the Earth wasn't round? If the Earth is flat, the entire world as we know it doesn't exist in a way that we can properly make sense of with the tools we have before us. It would be the greatest conspiracy theory of all time. There are some people who, for some reason or another, believe that the Earth is in fact flat. Most of these people are remarkably stupid who are being fooled by con men, but I digress. That's a topic for a different video. Is the Earth actually flat? No. We can say that for a fact. No, it is not. But it is a common myth that people once widely believed that the Earth was flat, and perhaps some people widely believed that the Earth was flat, but this portion of the video is dedicated not to proving that, at one point in time people believed the Earth was flat, and now they don't. It's to show that people have always believed that the Earth was round. People have always known that. There's the fact that we have reports of a globe of the Earth, not a map, a globe, a little ball, in the 2nd century before Common Era. There's also the fact that even in the 1400s, we have globes surviving to the modern day. So an artifact made some 700 years ago survived to this day to show that no, not everybody believed that the Earth was flat. As a matter of fact, most scientists, mathematicians, and otherwise have not operated on the belief that the Earth was flat. We've known that the Earth was round. It makes a lot of sense with understanding physics and math that you would find out that the Earth is in fact a ball, and you don't need a bunch of complex stuff to understand math. You just gotta have one really, really interested fella, if you catch my drift. The kind of interest one would typically have in planes or trains or automobiles. Good movie, by the way. So this little category of the iceberg is not dedicated to showing, oh, people always believed the Earth was flat, and we've recently changed that, but the inverse, people have for the most part known that the Earth was round. It's just that back in the day, the common peasant was not having a microphone shoved in their face being like, "Hello, serf for some Russian noble. Do you believe the Earth is round?" Good answer, thank you. Most people just didn't think about that because they didn't have the time or the resources or the care. I mean, if you think about it right now, of course you know the Earth is round, I'm presuming. But how often do you actually think about that fact? If you're like a deeply existential person who spent too much time looking into philosophy when they were 16, like me, you might think about it like once or twice a week. If you're a scientist, you might think about it pretty often. But if you are just... And even then, if you're a scientist, unless you are related to space or the study of the Earth, you're probably not thinking about it that often. If you're just some Joe Schmo, which most people are, you're not even gonna fucking think about the Earth. Doesn't change that it's a ball, though. Actually, quick fact check. It's not a ball. It's whatever the fuck this shape is. The germ theory of disease. To put a long thing, a very long thing, very short, here's how disease works. There's little dudes in everything, and if you fuck up, those little dudes will be inside you. even if you don't fuck up, those little dudes, they're still going to be inside of you. And some of those little dudes want to cause you bodily harm. Want is a loose word here. I mean, the bacteria doesn't really want anything, but it does. It causes you bodily harm, right? That's a little bit of a problem. But this wasn't always widely accepted as how the transmission and spread of disease worked. Or so the story goes, because germs, as we know them, weren't really discovered or elaborated heavily upon until the 1890s, when the golden age of virology ensued. What actually happened before then is the miasma theory, which I've never read about before, so we're going to be reading what I just read before I recorded this video. From Wikipedia, the miasma theory was the predominant theory of disease transmission before germ theory took hold towards the end of the 19th century. It is no longer accepted as a correct explanation for disease by the scientific community. It held that diseases such as cholera, chlamydia, or the Black Death were caused by a miasma, a noxious form of bad air emanating from rotting organic matter. Miasma was considered to be a poisonous vapor or mist filled with particles from decomposed matter that was identifiable by its foul smell. Imagine explaining that to the missus. No, darling. I got syphilis because I smelled the bad miasma. No other reason. The theory posited that diseases were the product of environmental factors such as contaminated water, foul air, and poor hygienic conditions, which is kinda accurate. Such infections, according to the theory, were not passed between individuals, but would affect those within a location that gave rise to such vapors. So if you were born in the syphilis pit, bad news, buddy. You got syphilis now, according to miasma theory. The thing is that this is not correct. I mean, the idea of people should have clean air and clean water and be in clean places, that does lead to people having less disease. You've got the prevention part down, but the clean air, clean water, and good hygiene is not what is entirely stopping the disease. Disease still exists even if you do those things. They give rise to disease if you don't do those things, but if you're doing those things, disease can still exist, and that was a huge problem for a lot of human society. So germ theory is a thing that has been in development for a long time. In ancient Greece and Rome, people understood that, hey, if you got close to a person who is sick, you would get sick. What a fucking thought. So they posited a theory of seeds of disease, which were these tiny little guys that you couldn't see that were floating in the air or somewhere, and if you got them in you, congrats. You have the seeds of disease, you get a disease, the disease grows. Kind of like a fucked up plant. That's pretty close. That's pretty good. There are other places where people recognize that, hey, maybe the people are spreading this. Just not Middle-Age Europe. As a matter of fact, the Middle Ages were quite a bad time for certain aspects of medical science as we know it, but there were still some innovations. A hybrid form of miasma and contagion theory, as a matter of fact, was proposed by the Persian physician Ibn known as Avicenna in Europe. The Canon of Medicine, written in 1025, mentioned that people can transmit disease to others by breath, and noted the contagion of tuberculosis. And he also discussed the transmission of disease through water and dirt, which you can in fact get diseases from all three of those things. During the Middle Ages, Isidore of Seville mentioned plague-bearing seeds, the same thing that the Greeks and the Romans talked about. And even Martin Luther from the 16th century, yes, that guy who angrily stapled shit to church doors, that Martin Luther had some idea of the contagion theory, being quoted as saying, "I have survived these plagues and visited several people who had 2 plague spots which I touched, but it did not hurt me, thank God. Afterwards, when I returned home, I took up Margaret, who was then a baby, and put my unwashed hands on her face, because I had forgotten, otherwise I should not have done it, which would have been tempting God." Basically, that story is saying, oh yeah, I accidentally gave a kid disease because I didn't fucking wash my hands. this guy gets that you should wash your hands. But back in the day, back in the yonder days of yore, physicians weren't exactly clean job or position, if you will. As a matter of fact, doctors kind of took pride in being coated in blood, because it showed that they were a real doctor who was really fixing you up, getting all covered in your juices. And the concept of washing your hands before treating patients was laughed at. And because of that, a lot of people died. As a matter of fact, the idea that maybe bacteria or problems could be contained within something or a surface or fluid or even on your hands didn't really gain traction until the mid-19th century, when French microbiologist Louis Pasteur, yes, the guy from pasteurization, showed that treating the female genital tract with boric acid killed microorganisms, causing postpartum infections while avoiding damage to mucous membranes. Building on another physician's work, Pasteur disproved the spontaneous generation theory by constructing swan neck flasks containing nutrient broth. Since the flask's contents were only fermented when in direct contact with the external environment's air by removing the carved tubing, Pasteur demonstrated that bacteria must travel between sites of infection to colonize environments, which basically means there's a little guy going little places, causing big problems. This work continued in the UK and in Germany, and where cholera was a problem and where a lot of people were, because previously where there were a lot of people just kept on dying. And eventually, at about the turn of the century, not the 2000s, but the 1900s, it became a widespread good idea that, hey, maybe you should go wash your fucking hands and not be coated in blood. And the visage of the doctors of old went away, and the visage of the doctors of new, as clean professionals in a white shirt and a tie, started to be born. So yeah, we were really incorrect about germ theory. Really incorrect about it. We killed a bunch of people because we were really incorrect about it. Go humanity. Plate tectonics. Plate tectonics is probably a thing that you, if you are similar to my age, were introduced to by a little rat trying to get his nut. And honestly, I've seen little rats do worse to get a nut, and I'm not talking about rodents. Basically, plate tectonics is the idea and the fact that, the continents are moving around, and they're doing weird stuff, and the map will not always be the same, right? Eventually, continents will move so far that we will no longer recognize a map if we were to be shown it, and if you were to travel way back in time, you wouldn't recognize that map either, because the continents have moved. This is a very new theory, very new thought in the minds of people. As a matter of fact, it's so new that unlike the other ones where I can point to some point in history and go, yeah, these guys kind of had a clue about it, we didn't really have a clue about that for most of recorded history, none that I know of. The development of plate tectonics as a theory happened in the 20th century, and for those of you unaware with the whole century system, and you call the century the one that happens after it, so the 21st century is right now, because the next century will be 2100. A little weird, but just keep that in mind, kiddo. Essentially, in the 1900s, a meteorologist looks at a world map and goes, this looks like it fits together, like a jigsaw all shuffled around. Interesting. This is Alfred Wegener, and he goes, hey guys, maybe everything at some point was connected, and everyone goes, the fuck do you know, weather boy? Shut up, nerd. See, the crucial component of Alfred Wegener's theory was that perhaps the continents and all land as we know it is a less dense material sitting on a denser material, allowing it to wiggle around a little bit. And that was not a thing that we really wanted to think about, or talk about, or prove or disprove, until the 1920s. See, despite much opposition, the view of continental drift gained support, and a lively debate started between mobilists and fixists, people who think shit could move and people who think shit couldn't. During the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, the former reached important milestones, proposing that convection currents might have driven the plate movements, and spreading may have occurred below the sea within the oceanic crust. Concepts close to the elements of plate tectonics were proposed by geophysicists and geologists, both fixists and mobilists, like Venning Menzies, Holmes, and Umgrove. In 1941, Otto Ampferer described in his publication Thoughts on the Motion Picture of the Atlantic Region processes that had anticipated seafloor spreading and subduction, one of the first pieces of geophysical evidence that was used to support the movement of lithospheric plates, and that came from paleomagnetism. This is based on the fact that rocks of different ages show a variable magnetic field direction, which basically means if you take a really old piece of rock and you look at the iron inside of it, iron is a ferrous material, Earth has a magnetic field that has a compass north. So, little tiny microscopic iron particles will point north while they're superheated, while the rock is being made. And if you look at some rocks, north is a different direction. It shouldn't do that unless stuff is moving around, unless the rocks at some point were being deceived into believing that north is a different direction. How intriguing. The second piece of evidence in support of continental drift came during the 1950s and early 60s from data on the bathymetry, that's a word, on deep ocean floors and the nature of oceanic crust such as magnetic properties, and more generally with the development of marine geology, which gave evidence for the association of seafloor spreading along the mid-Atlantic and oceanic ridges and magnetic field reversals, and this was published between 1959 to 1963 by various different scientists. Now, simultaneous advances in early seismic imaging techniques in and around the Wadolf-Beinhoff zones, that's its own video, along the trenches bounding many continental margins, together with many other geophysical and geological observations, showed how the oceanic crust could disappear into the mantle, proving the mechanism to balance the extension of ocean basins with the shortening along its margins. All of this evidence, both from the ocean floor and from the continental margins, made it clear, around 1965, that continental drift was feasible and in fact happening. The theory of plate tectonics was defined in a series of papers between 1965 and 1967. The theory revolutionized earth sciences, explaining a diverse range of geological phenomena and their implications in other studies such as paleogeography and paleobiology. So, essentially, some weather boy in 1912 goes, "Hey man, this all looks like it fits together." And everyone goes, "Ha, nerd." But the thing is, the observation that guy made is an observation just about any child could make looking at a map. And it wasn't until this meteorologist was like, "I think this all was one thing at some point, guys," that everybody was like, "Okay, guess we gotta look into it now." And then in 1960, the plate tectonic theory and continental drift theory was accepted, which is wild because it is a thing that is impacting our lives right now. And how does it impact our lives? Well, do you live in an area with earthquakes? I do. Do you live in the Pacific Northwest? I don't. Yet. Or anywhere with a volcano? Congratulations. Plate tectonics, it affects your life. The fact that we're moving just a little teensy tiny amount every year affects the way that we're living. It makes things just a little off. And in a few million years, if any of us are around to see that, maps will have to be remade. Isn't that delightful? As a matter of fact, because of plate tectonics, there's a new ocean forming in Africa. None of us will see it in our lifetimes, but that boy gonna be there long after we ain't. Final entry on this iceberg, we're gonna be talking about the history of atomic theory. See, you know how germ theory boils down to there's just a bunch of little guys? Well, the universe boils down to that, too. There's a bunch of little guys in everything. You see this lighter right here? You see that fire it just made that probably wrecked my camera's exposure? You see this microphone? It's all made of shit. What is that shit, though? Easy. It's made up of molecules, which often also make up compounds. But what are those molecules made of? Curious question indeed. They're made of atoms. Everything is made of atoms. So many atoms that we couldn't even begin to put a number on it, like an uncountable amount of those. And those atoms are basically just weird little balls of energy that form in certain patterns, almost like a little mini constellation, to eventually form a thing. And that thing forms a molecule, and that molecule forms a compound, and that compound forms a substance, and that substance eventually becomes us, or my microphone, or the camera, or you on the other side of that screen that you're watching it on. Everything's made up of atoms. But we didn't know that for a while. We knew things were made of stuff. What is the stuff? We have no idea. The basis for the idea that matter is made up of tiny indivisible particles was once a philosophical question called philosophical atomism. And it's an old idea that appeared in many ancient cultures. We all were like, what is this made of when looking at anything, right? The Greeks had a theory that there was like the 4 elements, that something could be made of earth, wind, fire, water, but is that really the case? Not particularly. And this affected pre-atomic chemistry a lot as well, because chemistry currently works on categorizing all of the stuff and the things into little boxes called the periodic table of elements that appeared to a Russian guy in a dream. Crazy story. But how did they do that beforehand? Not well. They didn't do it well. That's the answer. And for most of recorded history, we sucked at chemistry. We didn't know what shit was made of. And then John Dalton came along and he started having some hypotheses. And then there was Mendelev's periodical table. Then there was the kinetic theory of gases and a bunch of other huge scientific innovations that eventually gave rise to the atomic theory. But for most of human history, we were completely fucking incorrect about what anything is made of. So yeah, we were wrong. Alright kids, we did it. We made it to the end of the video. Hooray! If you liked this video, go ahead and subscribe. If you didn't like this video, don't do that. If you're already subscribed but you're still here, leave a comment. Comment like a lemon emoji or some shit. I don't know, man. As always, thank you so much for watching, and huge thanks to the patrons who make this channel possible. The more money I get from creative stuff, the more I can do creative stuff and be able to spend my time here talking about times that people were wrong. So, that all being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up now. Have a great time. We'll see each other again very soon. And until next time, memento mori, but more importantly, memento vivier.